Hi everybody, it's Wendy Gale, and today's video has nothing to do with baking or food whatsoever. It's going to be about my ACE group fitness exam. And yes, this week I did take the test and I passed it. I've been studying for this exam for about 3 to 4 months. And I wanted to make a video because outside of ACE's own website, and maybe a few blogs out there, there really wasn't a lot of information about taking this test, passing it, or even reviewing the course in general. So I thought, let me try doing this. So in addition to going through the materials that I have, the packages, taking the test, the tips, the pointers, I also want to make mention that prior to signing up for ACE's group fitness program, I did look into AFA, which is also another well-recognized group fitness organization. So the two most popular ones, or the two most well-recognized ones, would be ACE and AFA. There are others out there. I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying that the two that I just mentioned are really probably the most popular. AFA is more popular for group fitness. ACE is really more popular for personal training certifications. So if you are going for your ACE personal training certification, a lot of the information I'm going to go over today actually will apply to you as well. But it's really mostly going to be for the group fitness instructor program that I just completed. So let's get started. First of all, when you go onto ACE's website, they do sell the products in packages. Now you could buy them individually, the books, the tests, all that can be purchased individually. That's great for somebody who maybe has a friend that already took it and they're lending them your books, their books. They're lending you their books. Or if you worked in the industry for many years already and you feel you just don't need certain things, that's great. But I did take the premium package, and what the premium package did include is the ACE Essentials of Exercise Science book. This is the book they also include in the personal training package. Now for personal trainers, this book is more important than for group fitness instructors, but nonetheless, there were test questions from this book on my exam as well, and you do need it. They also sent me the flashcards that go with the Essentials of Exercise Science book. To be honest with you, I didn't even use them. I made up my own flashcards and I thought that was a bigger help. They send you the latest group fitness manual. With this, you get their Master the Manual, which is just the workbook that accompanies it with each chapter. They also send a sample test. This is a handwritten test. It's only 60 questions, where the real test is about 150, but it gives you an idea of the type of questions they do ask. And in addition to this, you get some online resources. For example, they have a Facebook page where you can ask questions. They have a toll-free number. They do have a lot of support. They also have modules, which are quizzes. So after you complete every 1 to 2 chapters in the group fitness manual, you take a quiz to see how you're doing. And they include 2, not 1, but 2 online practice tests, which if you don't have it included in your package, I highly recommend buying them separately. Not one of them, both of them, because if it wasn't for those tests, I don't think I would have passed. And also included is the exam voucher. And I thought it was worth the money pretty much for that alone, because that was like $250 just to take the exam. So with that said, you can decide what products you want. ACE will give you a 12-week outline that you can follow. It's optional. I wanted to take a few extra weeks, so I did it probably in about 14, 15 weeks. I also spent roughly 15 hours a week dedicated to studying for this test. Now I know a lot of you have families, kids, jobs. I have a full-time job, plus I do videos on weekends, and I was still able to fit this in because it was that important to me. And it was a very hard test. It is doable if you commit to doing this. I just want to point out, my comprehension is not real great. Only because I'm very impatient. I like to rush over things, just get things done. My mind is always everywhere else, but not really paying attention. So with that said, what I did was I would read through the chapter first. Then I would read through it again. The second time I highlighted important facts throughout the chapter. Then I would read it a third time and take notes, and then go through the manual and answer the questions that corresponded with each question. And I did that for every chapter in both books, and I did that until I completely finished the program. Now, after every 2 chapters, there's a quiz, an online quiz that goes with it, and I would take the quizzes as well. So after the first 2 chapters in this book, I would do the module number 1, and see how well I did. Then after doing that, I took one of the online practice tests. And by the way, they tell you to take this one before you even start the program, just to see. You're probably going to fail it, but just to see how much you may know without even reading the books. You'd be surprised how many questions you'll get right. But throughout the program, I did keep taking this test, and I was doing better and better. But of course, you tend to memorize the answers to these questions, so of course you're going to do better. After I completed the whole program, I did the first online practice test, and I passed it. By the skin of my teeth, I passed it. But what they do on their practice tests is they will give you the page number and the book of where that question came from. So if you don't do well on that, you can just go back to that chapter and just reread the topic over again. So then I would do that. Then after rereading the whole book all over again, both of them, mind you, not just one, I would take the next online test, and then I did pass that as well. But there were still some questions I got right, but I wasn't sure of them, so I would go and even reread chapters and sections all over again. I typed up some notes. I had about 24 pages of notes on everything I could think of, because you really want to know all of the terminology in there. You really want to understand the concepts. And the reason for that is the real test, as well as the practice tests, don't really have that many recall questions. They're mostly application questions. So if you don't understand what something means, you're just not going to get it right on the test. So how I prepared for this test, I typed up my notes, took my notes everywhere I went, and I would just try and just read through just a little bit here and there, take the time, make sure the room was real quiet, and just go over and go over and go over everything. Repetition, it works. It really does work. So you want to keep reading and rereading and rereading. Now, to understand some of these concepts, what I ended up doing was I would try and picture in my mind how this would apply in a real life setting. And because I'm a member of the gym, when I would go to the gym, so for example, I would go to one of the fitness classes, and I would observe how the group fitness instructor was teaching the class, and I would point out in my mind, oh, okay, that's the command style of teaching. Or if we were doing sit-ups, I would visually think of which muscles were actually being worked while doing those sit-ups. Biceps, what was being, which muscles were concentric, which were eccentric. When you apply it to yourself doing exercises, it makes it a lot easier to remember, because the hardest part about this program was memorizing the muscles. Number one pointer, and I'm sure many of you who have taken this test or even the ACE personal training test would agree, is read the questions very, very thoroughly and read all of the answer choices thoroughly. The test is completely multiple choice. 2 of the answers are very similar, and you have to determine which one is the best answer. By reading the questions real well, I noticed there are key words in both the questions and the answers that will help you determine which answer is the best answer. For me, that was actually the hardest part, because as I said, I'm impatient. I generally skim over stuff. Like, I'm one to skim over a question, scan down, look for the first answer that's right, and answer it. So I had to prepare myself for this, and that was really the hardest part for me. Another thing, they have multiple tests that they give. So the test I took may not be the same test that you will take. So I'm not going to give you the exact questions they asked me. It's not likely it would be on your test, but I will break it down to a lot of the subject matter that was covered. And not just me, but I spoke to other people who have taken this test, and it was similar to what they said as well. One, there weren't that many anatomy questions. That's the number one question I was asked when I told my fellow group fitness trainees about that I took this test. Maybe 5 to 10 questions on anatomy. They were all on major muscle groups, and they were all pretty much in relation to exercise. So they didn't have a chart and you had to name where the muscles were located. They would just ask what muscles being engaged when you do a sit-up, something to that extent. They would also ask which muscles would act concentrically and eccentrically. So there were a few like that. There were questions on hot and cold weather, exercising. There were quite a few questions on teaching styles, learning, cueing, and feedback. So those 4 things you definitely want to make sure you thoroughly understand. And if you go to a real live gym or go to group fitness classes, it makes it a lot easier because you could point out what your instructor is doing, how they're cueing as well. So that made it a lot easier for me. There were several questions on insurance and liability, very important. And there were some questions on special populations. Now, a few people I spoke to who took the test, theirs had more questions about it than mine, but there were a few on pregnant women, senior citizens. They even had one on children, and maybe I think diabetes or asthma, something like that. Not a lot of them. There were a few on those injuries, the chapter that has about the sprains, the strains, and what surprised me was the questions they had on those were not on exercise modifications, which you would think would be what they would ask, because that's really more important, is to know how to modify an exercise for somebody who has a rotator cuff impingement, for example. They didn't ask that. They asked what caused it, or what muscle, what physical component was responsible for it. That's probably a better way to say it. So for, I think it was the plantar fasciitis, they wanted to know if it was a tissue tear or something like that. And that's really all they asked me for those. So for me, that was a little bit of a guesswork because I didn't spend a lot of time studying that. I thought they would ask the modifications. So just to give a heads up, make sure you know everything regarding that subject. Not just the modifications, but also symptoms of some of the conditions that are there. They did ask for a few symptoms of heat stroke or something to that extent. There was one math problem. I know they give you a lot of this heart rate, target heart rate calculations and all the sample tests. They didn't even ask that. It was a math problem regarding how long would it take for someone to burn 10 pounds if they reduced their caloric intake by X number of calories a day and worked out and burned X number of calories a week, and you had to do a math calculation. But they do have a calculator by the test, so if you can't do it in your head, not a problem. Just make sure you know how to do those calculations on a calculator. As far as how they do this, how they score the test, it's kind of complicated. And the books actually do have this domain section where they explain it, because they have 4 domains, and depending on the subject matter is what the domain consists of. And some of the domains are weighted heavier than others. Lucky for me, the domain regarding classroom structure was a heavier weight than anatomy. So if one question from anatomy is not equal to the same as one question from another domain that has a heavier weight. So you can't really say, well, how many questions do I have to get right to pass the test? It doesn't go by that. It goes by points, and they score it. So the highest score you can get, that's if you get 100, every question right, or 150 questions right. Actually 125 questions, but I'll explain that in a minute. But if you get all the questions right, the most you can get is 800. You need a minimum of 500 to pass the test. I got 602. I don't know if that's good, bad, or average. All I know is I passed, and that was good enough for me. It's 150 questions, but they only grade you on 125 questions. 25 questions in that test are saved, are in there because as for experimentation, so they may add it into a test in the future, and they're experimenting putting it in this test. The good thing is some of the questions I got wrong may possibly have been from those questions not counted. The bad news is you don't know what questions they are. They don't point them out. As I had said before, is I had checked out AFA, which is the Aerobics and Fitness Association of America, and I checked out their program before signing up for ACE. So what I did here is I just ordered a secondhand manual from them, read through it, and I really liked the ACE program better as far as the text. They give you much more. It was very informational. Both organizations, though, are really very good. The deciding factor for me to go with ACE over AFA, and this may seem ridiculous to you, is that while both of them do have an online or home-based and or online program, they also both have weekend workshops. So if you want to do this in a couple of days, you could go to an AFA weekend workshop for 2-3 days and get your certification. But they're long, all-day processes, and I don't have the time to do that. So for me, the only option was to do the home study / online program. And with ACE, when you do test, you don't test online. You actually go to a testing site and it's proctored. With AFA, you test online, but it's still proctored through technology. I don't know the name of the software, but it's similar to Skype. There's somebody that actually watches you while you take this test. So you can't, it's not open book. But the deciding factor for me to go with ACE is because AFA also makes you do a practical portion, whereas they make you audition, so to speak. You have to put a routine together and you have to stand there in front of somebody with your computer screen on while they watch you do it. Now, the reason I didn't think that would have been wonderful for me is I'm not exactly sure where I totally want to go with this certification. I do have an idea, but I'm not ready to reveal that yet. But I also wanted to do more of a martial arts because that's my specialty. I've been training in it for 10 years. And with martial arts, you're not going to be doing aerobic style routines. So it's a waste of time if I do that to have to do a routine for someone for testing. So I didn't really want to go there. But that's not the only reason. I live in an apartment, second floor apartment. I can't start with carpeting, no less. And there was no way I would be able to do a practical test for my apartment. And especially when I have somebody that lives underneath me who doesn't want to hear that. And you know, with carpeting, you trip, you this, you that, and I don't have a lot of room as well. So for me, that was really the deciding factor. I didn't mind going down to a testing center. In my case, I had to go down to Center City, Philadelphia for half a day just to take the test to pass, and that was it. But that's up to you. Again, both organizations are really very good. I do have the links below in the description box if you're interested in checking them out. If you have any questions regarding testing, again, this is the group fitness for ACE, but a lot of the personal training was the test is different, the system's the same. If you have questions, just comment below, ask me what they are, and I'll try and answer them as best as I can. I hope this helps you out, and hopefully you'll subscribe to my website if you like baking, cookie cake decorating. I'm going to be putting more fitness videos up there, of course, and travel videos. I do have a trip coming up in a few months, but I'll see you next time.